So for this last lecture, I will at last start the study of partially dissipative systems, nonlinear ones. The first 3 lectures, I prepared all the material that was needed to do this study. So the class that I want to consider is the following one. So let's call it global well-posedness. Global well-posedness for well, a class, or not all, but for some partially dissipative systems. Okay, so the class of systems that I want to consider is the following one. So let's call them like this, partially dissipative. So this is a system of partial differential equations, which looks like the one that we studied yesterday, except that there will be a 0-order term that I will take linear for simplicity. Okay, I don't consider the most general class. I just consider a subclass for simplicity. So now you have some, you have this kind of term. And what is new compared to what I did yesterday? And you have linear, well, linear for simplicity. You can also have a non-linear part, but the main part is this one, equals 0. So I have to remember, I have to do some assumptions. So remember that the matrices AJ are defined on the phase space, which is subspace of Rn, open subset. And there are values with, it's very important that they are symmetric. Okay, so they are symmetric. What else? Yeah, I did not recall, but you also need a reference state, constant reference state, U bar. And U is just U bar plus V. Okay, I look at the perturbation of a constant solution of the system. So, of course, if you look at the system, it means that clearly you must have B. Well, no, anyway, it's written in that way, it's correct. Okay, what else? I need some assumption on B. So B, what is the symmetric part of B should be non-negative. So the assumption that I need is this one, B, V, scalar V is greater than some positive number, B, V square. And the new assumption, so this symmetry assumption was needed yesterday for hyperbolic systems. In fact, you can make it more general, but it's also possible to put some A0 here, like yesterday, and to just, instead of assuming that these matrices are symmetric, you can assume that they are symmetrizable, like yesterday. But well, for simplicity, I just consider this framework. And a last assumption that I didn't have yesterday, but which is terribly important if you want to have global well-posedness, is that you need that the Shizuta-Kawashima condition is satisfied at the reference state. So what do I mean? I mean that if I consider the total symbol associated to this family of matrices, so if I consider xi equals the sum on J of I psi j a bar j. So, okay, I will introduce some notation. A bar j, by definition, is the value of the matrix at the reference state. Okay, so you have assumed that A, the couple A and B, but B is just a constant matrix. You need this to satisfy the SK condition, Shizuta-Kawashima, or the Kalman-Rank condition at every psi, which is not 0, or equivalently for every psi in the unit sphere. Equivalent by homogeneity is equivalent to assume this or for every psi which is not 0. Okay, so the question is, okay, we want to solve the question, proving global existence and uniqueness, well, global well-posedness, in fact. So by global well-posedness, I mean global existence, uniqueness, and stability with respect to the data in some sense. Maybe not for the highest norm, but at least for something. Okay, proving global well-posedness for perturbations of U bar, which means for small initial data. So for small V0. So V0 being the initial data. So, well, the first difficulty is what is the good we have to find. The meaning of small is not clear at this stage, and also we have it's related to the fact that we have to find a framework for solving the system. So the main question is what is a functional framework for doing that? So there is some hint, because after all, this system is just a subclass of the class of system that I considered yesterday. Yesterday I told you that for simplicity, I didn't put any zero-order term, but the theory is the same if you put zero-order term. So clearly, it has to be, if I want to prove such a result, it has to be a functional framework in which you have a local well-posedness. So it must be embedded in the one that we saw yesterday, at least with a dot. Why? Because something that was terribly important all the time in the estimate, it was the control of the gradient of V. Because must be controlled, must be bounded. Okay, and then in the Bezos-Pesos framework, okay, I mean, I will use the Bezos-Pesos framework because we saw yesterday that for hyperbolic systems it needs to be the optimal one, and also because it was an appropriate one for the linear study that we did before. Okay, there are other possibilities, but this one seems to be quite nice. Okay, so this is the first indication, which somehow involves high frequencies, okay? But we also need low frequency conditions, so, and for that, there is something more which is important, that you see that here you have nonlinear terms everywhere, so you have products everywhere, and whenever you want to control a product without using regularity, the least that you can ask is to have a control in L infinity. So it must be a subspace of L infinity because you have products, because nonlinear terms. And again, if you think of Bezos-Pesos, it means that it must be embedded in B, D over 2 to 1. Yeah? Yeah, the component of capital V, so what? Okay. No, so I tried to find, to guess what could be a good functional framework. So in short, it seems that a functional framework in which you can expect to have global well-posedness must be embedded in this and this, therefore in the intersection of the two, okay? And this is, in fact, if you look at the definition that I gave yesterday of, or 2 days ago of Bezos-Pesos restricted to low and high frequencies, the intersection of these two spaces is equivalent to saying that low frequencies are here and high frequencies are here. But we are going to recover it again. So, okay, let me start the proof by using what I did for the linearization of this system. So I will write this system like a linear system. Okay, so on the left-hand side, I keep all the linear terms. So instead of putting a matrix depending on U, I put just Hj bar, so that I have something which is linear. So I have this term B. And on the right-hand side, I put on the nonlinear terms. Okay, so they may be written in that way. So Hj bar minus Hj U Dj V. And while by using the first order, the mean value formula, you can guess that for small v, this looks, no, it's not equal, but it looks a bit like v, okay? So you may see at the right-hand side, for simplicity, if you want, you can see at the right-hand side as just the sum of quadratic terms. Of course, it's more complicated, but if you are just looking at small v, it behaves in the same way. Okay, so I will use the linear estimate that I proved well, yesterday. So let me first look at low frequencies. So for low frequencies, I will try to estimate them in a space like BS21. So far, I don't know what is the value of S. I will try to find something which is good. Okay, so yesterday we saw that there exists some Lyapunov functional. Let's call it LSL, which is equivalent to the norm of V BS21. And some dissipation term. Okay, so this is what I did yesterday, in fact, which is equivalent to, okay, I have two more derivatives. Such that the solution, the low frequencies of the solution of this system may be estimated as follows. Because Shizuta-Kawashima condition is satisfied, I can end up with this kind of differential inequality. It's what I proved yesterday. Okay, there's some constant, and here HSL is smaller. So yesterday I proved this, but I had no right-hand side. Okay. Now, when you have the right-hand side, as usual, what you do, if you look, you go back to the computation that I did yesterday. So you start with L2 estimate and so on, Cauchy-Schwarz, and then you will realize very soon that it's equivalent to estimating this term like V actually. Okay, so it's like up to some constant, estimating the right-hand side in this term, in this space. So maybe I should give a name. So it's, of course, it's equivalent to V, but I will call it, what could be a good notation? A, I have too many A, I don't know. N, like nonlinear, Nj, V. Okay, so it's equivalent to the sum of Nj V, djv, quadratic terms, more or less, in BS21. Why BS21? But because, in fact, what I get naturally is something which is related to this functional, but is equivalent to this, and just the low frequencies. So if you look at this term, is it good or not? Assume that, well, this term is just, you just have djv. In fact, you have djv multiplied by something, which is even worse. If you just have djv, you want to estimate djv in this space, which means that you need one more derivative. You need s plus 1. So it looks that you lose one derivative, which is not good. But you have to remember that you have to do it, it's just low frequencies. So if you look at the definition of Bezier spaces for low frequencies, So it means that you need regularity s plus 1 of V. So there is a factor 2 to the j s plus 1, but j is negative for low frequencies. So in fact, having a plus 1 is not a problem, it's not an issue, because you may just bound 2 to the j by 1. Okay, so you may replace this by, well, still the sum with index bs minus 1, if you like. Why is it true? Because you have restricted to low frequencies. Of course, for high frequencies, it's completely false. But if you just keep low frequencies, you can bound the S norm by the S minus 1 norm. Okay? This one, in fact, is stronger for low frequencies. It's not natural first to do, but it's true. So now you use the product law at this level, and you end up with something, well, maybe I cheat a little, but in the end, of course, when you do some product, all frequencies will be mixed. For example, products of high frequencies can give low frequencies, so you completely lose the localization, but you don't care. We'll see after what we do with this term. So you will get right-hand side, which is like this. And that's it for low frequencies. And if you look, okay, you have to do some product, more or less, the computation is true for all positive S. You may, you have something which is true for all positive S. So far, I did not really choose S, even though I have in mind probably that S will be d over 2, but maybe it's not the optimal choice, we'll see. Okay, so now the question is for high frequencies. So can I repeat the same computation? Formally, I can do exactly the same. The difference is that for high frequencies, the L functional will be, well, high frequencies, I already chose to do it at the level d over 2 plus 1, as I explained before. Because owing to the local well-possessed theory, I cannot ask less than that. So if I repeat the same, for high frequencies, the L is equivalent to the norm in B d over 2 plus 1, as well as the H. Okay? And you have a right-hand side, and then now it's not good, because to lose one derivative. If you estimate the right-hand side, like I did here, with d over 2 plus 1, you will have a problem, because for high frequencies, you cannot say that d over 2 plus 1 is bounded by d over 2. It's completely false, of course. You really lose one derivative. So you cannot do it in that way. I mean, putting all the nonlinear terms in the left-hand side is not good. So in fact, what we are doing, you will repeat what I did for the pure hyperbolic systems. So in fact, I will do it in 2 steps. I will first look at what I call the principal part, which correspond to basic energy estimate somehow. Except as I want to reach this kind of norms, I have to localize the system by Littlewood-Paley decomposition, as I did yesterday. So, okay, I localize VQ is the localization by delta Q V. Okay. Then I did the computation yesterday. And what I say, I wrote the system in that form. Plus, the only difference is that I have the term with B. But it's not an issue because B is a constant matrix. So of course it commutes with delta Q. And like yesterday, I have a commutator term. But I explained yesterday how you can be handled. Okay, so I repeat exactly what I did yesterday. I mean, I take the scalar product with VQ in L2, plus commutator estimate, plus integration by parts in this term where I use the symmetry of A, plus commutator estimate to handle the right-hand side. And what I get is the following. It's exactly the same computation as yesterday. So I get the first term give this. For this one, I will integrate by part and I will put it on the right-hand side. So the new term is this one with the B, but by assumption, B VQ may be bounded from below by kappa B VQ L2 square. Okay? So the yesterday computation gives this term, this new term, which is good, is non-negative. And on the right-hand side, well, you will have two terms. The one that comes from integration by parts, which gives, after applying Hölder inequality, this, what I denoted by divergence, well, it's derivative of AJ, sum of derivative of AJ. And VQ square. Okay, but the VQ square, I will have it elsewhere also. Okay, and the term that comes from the commutator is CQ to the Q divided 2 plus 1. What else? The norm of gradient of V in B divided 2. The norm of V, gradient V, in L infinity. And finally, what else? And all this is factored by VQ L2. But actually, this term here, by using the chain rule, it may be bounded by gradient V L infinity. And this one, by using the definition of Bezoar spaces, you may bound it as well by CQ, 2 minus Q, and so on, okay? So in fact, this term, the first term is of the same type as the second one. It will be bounded by the second one. So you, in fact, somehow, you may forget this one. It will be bounded like this one. Okay, so this is exactly this is a computation that I did yesterday, except that I had this new term, which is good. But it's not enough because I said yesterday, the goal is to completely reconstruct the norm of VQ in this term. And for that, you have to consider the Borchardt-Zouavsov functional. And so, well, okay, let's try to do it. But if you do it by starting with this equation, it's not good because here you don't have a linear term any longer. Okay, so what you have to do is to say, okay, in fact, you have to remember that for high frequency, the overterm of, so maybe I should write it somewhere. So far, maybe it's a good idea to keep the assumptions on the system. Yeah. LGV. Why do you have a... On the right-hand side here? Why? This is just this equation that I applied delta Q, there's just a commutator. At this step, at this stage, there are no... What is LGV? I mean, the dysfunctional? Here, so far, I just use, there is no Borchardt-Zouavsov functional here, it's just L2 estimate. Yeah? The commutator's term is, yeah? I do not see what is wrong. Yeah, it comes from this one, so. Ah, okay, thanks. No, you are perfectly right. The derivative. Yeah, thanks. Okay. Yeah, I forgot the derivative. But, well, the estimate is true nevertheless. Okay, so in order to completely reconstruct the L2 norm of VQ, you need to add other terms, but you have to remember that for high frequencies, other terms of Borchardt-Zoissois functional. So you have to remember that for high frequencies, you know, in the definition, in factor of the sum, you add with the notation of yesterday, you have the minimum between S and S minus 1, and S was the size of the frequency. So for here, in this context, the size of the frequency is 2 to the Q. So for high frequencies, the factor will be 2 to the minus Q. So other terms of BZ functional come with factor 2 to the minus Q. And 2 to the minus Q, it exactly compensates the loss of one derivative, which exactly compensates the loss of one derivative. Well, for the localized equation. For the localized equation. For the localized system. Therefore, for these terms, you may argue for as for low frequencies by using the form which is here. Let's denote it by 2 star. So using the form 2 star is good for this term. What I mean that you just you can to handle this term, you can look at the system as a linear equation with a source term. Okay, so I will not give the details. By doing this, you will see that these terms generate only terms which are of this type with S equal D over 2 plus 1. So in the end, I don't want to give details because it's not so exciting. I prefer to spend time on something else, but in the end, well, they will be bounded. So no, maybe I just write the final estimate. Is that you find for high frequencies, you find some LH, which is equivalent to the high frequencies of V in B over 2 plus 1 to 1, which and some dissipation functional, which is also equivalent to this, and satisfying the inequality d t of LH plus some constant HH is smaller than, well, after doing some summation, you see that here, if you multiply by 2 to the Q d over 2 plus 1, and you sum and simplify by VQL2, then you get this term. So you get a term like this. So more or less, it's what you get. I'm cheating a little, but well, more roughly, it's what you get in the end. Okay, so now if you put together this high frequency estimate and this low frequency estimate, so let me define, okay. So the conclusion is as follows. So finally, so you defined L equals L low frequencies plus H high frequencies, L high frequencies, the same for H. And you get this inequality, the derivative of L plus a small constant of H smaller than a big constant times L gradient of V L infinity. So, well, maybe it's slightly more complicated, the right-hand side is slightly more complicated, but more or less it would be like this. So in order to conclude, how is it possible from this inequality, all this is formal, but assume that you have a smooth solutions so that all these estimates are correct. How can you conclude to global distance, to global in time estimates from this kind of inequality? Well, it's possible if you are able to compare this with H, and if the data are small. So the question now, because there is still one parameter that I didn't fix, the value of S. So the question is that, okay, assume that I take so the first possible choice. So I said that S equal D over 2 was a good choice. But if you look at my computation, there is more natural choice. Is S equals D over 2 minus 1. Why is it a good choice? It's a good choice because S plus 2 equals D over 2 plus 1. Okay, and then you will be able to control the low frequencies, all the frequencies, in fact, of this by V, B D over 2 plus 1. And in this case, with this choice, you may just check the definition of H for low and high frequencies. In the two cases, H controls this irregularity. Okay? So if you choose S equals D over 2 minus 1, whatever the choice of S is, you have a control on this, of the high frequencies of this by this, because this is included in the definition of H, for high frequencies. But for low frequencies, it's not the case. It will be the case for this very choice. Okay, so it looks to be a good choice. So in that, if you do that, then this inequality that I will call, did not give number. So then 1 implies D plus C L smaller than up to a change of the constant. You can replace gradient V by H. And for this inequality, you see that if you assume that initially L0 is small, by small I mean, for example, smaller than C over 2. So by bootstrap, by connectivity argument, you will get, you will get this inequality. So you lose C over 2, but you do, no, it's the opposite. Yeah. Okay, so you have C over 2H smaller than 0 for all time. So this is an interesting inequality because not only it gives you global in-time control, but in fact it says much more. It said that you found a Lyapunov functional which is equivalent to the norm that you want to control. So I will not have time to do it. I decided to do something else today, but from this inequality, it's not too difficult to prove time decay estimate. I mean that if you assume in addition that initial data is say in L1, by combining this and this inequality, you can prove that the solution V tends to 0 when time tends to infinity at the same rate as the heat equation, which is not that much a surprise because the low frequencies of the system behave as a heat equation. But I will not have time to do this today. I prefer to concentrate on the high relaxation limit. Okay, so that it's what happened with each choice. So maybe it's worth to state a theorem. Why not? So, why do we need a bootstrap? Because okay, so whenever the bootstrap is written that way, you look all the time for which CL is smaller than this. So whenever it's the case, then you can absorb this term by the left-hand side, and you end up with this. Okay, and so you consider other times for which it's true. By continuity, it's an open subset. It's not. By continuity, it's a closed subset. It's also open because if it is true at some time, then it will be still true for later time, for a small time interval. So by connectivity, it will be true for all time. You can call this bootstrap or connectivity argument as you want. So this gives the first theorem that was in the PhD thesis of Timothée Crimbara. Well, in fact, and me. So, well, let's round to 21, which says that you assume, okay, so you assume that your dimension is greater than 2. So then there exists a small constant such that if the initial data is 0, so the low frequencies are in this space, and the high frequencies are in this space. So the alpha is very small, okay? So there is a unique global solution satisfying the inequality which is here. Of course, you have I didn't record it in the theorem, but provided that all the assumptions which are here are satisfied. In fact, we proved a slightly more general version because, you know, if you just apply this to this theorem, to this class of equation, it's not so interesting because it turns out that Euler equation is not exactly in this class. Okay, the reason why is that the Euler system that I wrote in the first course is not quite a symmetric hyperbolic system. It's just symmetrizable. So in fact, what we proved is a version where for a symmetrizable, so you have a A0 here, and it's a class of symmetrizable system. But you have exactly this theorem anyway. Okay, so is it completely satisfactory or not? So the good point what is good is that, well, it's quite general. I mean, you can, you don't have to restrict the class of matrices. Okay, but what is bad is that, well, it doesn't work in dimension 1. Why it doesn't work in dimension 1? Maybe I was a bit fast, but it's because of the exponent d/2 minus 1 that is negative if d equal 1. And then you have a troubles for low frequencies, in fact. Well, there are some terms that you are not able, some nonlinear terms that you are not able to estimate properly. And there is another problem, is that, well, anyway, you may expect that maybe in dimension 1, this kind of approach is not the optimal one. There is something more clever to do. And there is another problem, is that, so you will understand more when I will talk about the relaxation limit, but you have a bad behavior. Well, so far it's a bit mysterious, but you have a bad behavior by rescaling. So that if you want to study asymptotic limits, you will be in troubles. Okay? The first norm here, d/2 minus 1. Ah, yeah, sure. Sorry. Okay. Okay, so in fact, you have a second type of statement. But there is something that maybe you didn't notice, but in all the approach, I said that I slightly cheated, but even if I cheated, I never use the so-called damped mode. You can do it. If you use the damped mode, then you will have some additional assumption property, but to close the estimate, you don't need it. So maybe in good point, so it's less technical, no need of damped mode to close the estimate. Okay, now you have a second type of statement, but then you have, which is correspond to the regularity S equals d/2. So why do we want it to have a second result at level d/2? For two reasons. Because if you take low frequencies in this space, well, you will have in fact less restrictive smallest assumption. Because maybe it's not obvious to you, but if you replace d/2 minus 1 by d/2 for low frequencies, then it's less restrictive. It's smaller. Okay, and more importantly, under this assumption, you don't have obstruction to dimension 1. So you can do it in dimension 1. And also, in fact, the main motivation is that for this exponent, you have a good behavior by rescaling, because it turns out, we'll see it in a moment, that the norm b/2 to 1 is invariant by rescaling, which is very, very, very interesting if you want to study the relaxation limit. So it was possible to study it at this level of regularity, but you need more assumptions, some more structure assumptions on the matrices. So the one that you need are, okay, so you just need, that matrices. Okay, if I write the system by block, let me write AJ by block, as I did yesterday. Then you need that the matrices which are here depends only on U1. And the same for this one. And for the left bottom one also, just by symmetry. And the last one can be the general. Okay, but then if you have this structure, you have the same theorem, but with a norm B over 2. So theorem by the same authors, so Trimbarat and me, it was about the same year. Same theorem. Okay, if B d over 2 minus 1 is replaced by d over 2. So the additional difficulty is that if you start with this level of regularity, d over 2, then the low frequencies of V are only in the space L1 d over 2 plus 2. Okay? And so because of that, you have a lack of control of the low frequencies of the gradient V. Okay, so the problem that until here the proof is the same, no, where is it? Until you still get one, exactly in the same way, but then you don't know how to control this by H. Yeah? 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 No, this one, sorry. Yeah, so this one works for dimension 1, if it is your question. Because you don't have this, in dimension 1 it's positive, so you don't have problems any longer. Is it your question or? Yeah. Exactly. Well, I keep all the over assumptions, like the left blackboard, and I assume in addition that, well, you can write a system by block, and then these 3 blocks only depends on U1. Maybe I should say, well, maybe it's not clear. It's the same notation as yesterday. In fact, what I have to say is that you split the system by block in such a way that B looks like that, like yesterday. And then what you ask is that these 3 blocks only depends on the first part, on the components of the solution, which are not affected by C. This is important to do that. Well, you have to look more deeply into the estimates, but you need that to get this theorem. And also, you have a version with A0 dt, symmetrizable version as well, that allows you to handle the compressible Euler equation. The system also works for compressible, the theorem works for compressible Euler equations. So I don't want to write it on the blackboard, but just to explain. So the difficulty, okay, you can still get this, the one, but the difficulty, it's not possible to bound a gradient V by H, so that you cannot go to this. So the way to overcome this is to use the damped mode. So you use the damped mode, the better property of the damped mode for low frequencies, and you are going to include the damped mode with small constant here and here. And thanks to that, it will be possible to control the gradient V. Okay. It's a bit more technical. I don't want to spend time on that. I prefer to spend the rest of the time explaining the high relaxation limit. Yeah.
So in that case, this
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so last part. Let's call it high relaxation limit. So what's changed? I still consider the same class of system. But in fact, well, very soon I will just look at the. Okay, so the typical issue is that, okay, you look. Sorry. You look at this class of system, except that you enter a small parameter and you divide the zero order term by epsilon. Okay, so the question is, well, okay, let me keep the same assumption more or less, or well, I will erase. So I will erase just. The question is, what kind of system? So I put epsilon everywhere. What kind of system is satisfied by limit of V epsilon? Well, of course, if it exists. So I don't want to treat the general case, because anyway, even if I treat the general case, I will have to add a number of structure assumptions on all the matrices. I will directly concentrate on the Euler system, so that it would be more understand to see what can be expected. Okay, so I consider the compressible Euler with relaxation. Okay, I take so the interesting situation in the case where the density is a perturbation of some positive constant. So okay, I'll assume that rho equals 1 plus epsilon, epsilon. So what is the system that you get? So let's call it epsilon. So by doing the change of unknown, the transport equation is changed into dt a epsilon plus divergence of 1 plus a epsilon u epsilon equals 0. And the velocity equation becomes this. And also for simplicity, sorry, I should have said before, assume it's not, in fact, it's not important. It's just to have very simple terms. I will take the very special case of pressure, which is z square over 2. So in this case, the gradient of P is just, the gradient of rho is just gradient of rho times rho. And once you divide the equation, you obtain this very simple system. And I assume that I have a relaxation parameter. I divide by epsilon. Okay, so this is the system we want to look at. So in order to to find out what could be the limit, you have to do some rescaling. Which is the following one. So you change, what do? You change A, U, T, epsilon, into what? Sorry, X. You change it into, so you don't touch to epsilon. So for the time, I never know. So it should be this one, epsilon T. Sorry, so epsilon U, epsilon T, X. Yeah, the same. Yeah, it's the same form. Yeah. But what corresponds to B? Did I? Ah, sorry. No. You're completely right. No, no, it's not. I started to write a Lomax number. Sorry, it's not this one. You're completely right. It's this one. Sorry for that. I forgot one term, and there is no 1 over epsilon on the pressure term. Sorry. Okay, so if you perform this equation, what you get, so it turns out that the equation for A is unchanged. You still have a transport equation, like on the top blackboard, on the top line. But what's changed is that in this, you see that the epsilon here will occur twice. Once because you replace U by epsilon U, and another time because you time one-time derivative. So in fact, on the convection term, you have epsilon square. So of course, all this is formal. It's just to guess what could be the limit system. Okay, so formally, if you assume that you are able to show by some argument that you have uniform bounds, okay, then the second line says that at the limit, you will have U epsilon plus gradient of epsilon tends to 0. And this is an interesting combination because remember, it corresponds to the damp mode for the Euler equation. Okay, so at the limit, what we called before the damp mode tends to 0. And if you plug this information, okay, so if you plug this information in the first equation, you will find something else which is interesting. So assume that you have some limit. So it tends to some U tilde. Maybe I will change the notation. Assume that it tends to some BV. Then, formally, you will have V plus grad B equals 0. Okay, and if you plug this information in the first equation, what you get is dTB minus divergence of 1 plus B, gradient of B, equals 0. Okay, so it's a bit strange the first time you see that, because all the time for fixed epsilon, you have here, which is a mass conservation equation, one kind of transport equation, a kind of equation that was in the talk of Stefano yesterday. And then when you pass to the limit, you get something which is parabolic. So for those that saw this kind of equation before, it's called the porous. It's a particular case of porous media equation. Maybe I will denote it by Pn. So it's a parabolic equation that may degenerate if b tends to -1. And b tends to -1, my change of unknown correspond to the case where the density tends to 0. So there is some degeneracy at vacuum, except that, unfortunately, for the analysis that I am able to do so far, we'll concentrate on the case where b is close to 0. So somehow we don't have the most interesting case of the porous medium equation. But still, well, it is a porous medium equation. Okay, so it's a parabolic equation. So the issue is, now is to find a way to justify this heuristic. So you see that, I repeat again, that in this heuristic there was some interesting element, is that this limit, this combination, amounts to saying that the damp mode tends to 0, when epsilon tends to 0. And the damp mode, this is something that we were able to analyze in the previous computations. So probably to be useful. So there is something which is also very useful, is the scaling properties of Bezoff spaces, of homogeneous Bezoff spaces. And this is the reason why, because so far, well, this problem has been studied a lot, have already been studied before, but in all works, people were limited by the fact that they didn't use homogeneous spaces, so that they couldn't play with scaling invariance to get good estimates. So typically, if you use non-homogeneous Sobolev spaces, you will not have a good invariance, so you will be able to get only local in space information. So why is it interesting to use such spaces? Because you can check by yourself that if you want to compute, you take some function z, and you want to compute the norm after dilating the variable. So what happens? So, well, you can guess without doing any computation. Of course, it has to be proved, but what is going to happen is two things. The first thing that S, this corresponds to taking S derivative. So if you take S derivative, well, you will get epsilon to the S, certainly. And the L2 means that you work with L2 norms. So if you perform the change variable, the corresponding change variable in L2 norms, you get the minus d/2. Of course, this is not a proof, but it's a fast way to recover the scaling invariance. And so for the proof, what you have to do is that you go to the definition with Littlewood by decomposition, and you will see that in the case where the epsilon is some power of 2, positive or negative, then doing the change of variable corresponds to doing a shift in the summation. And then you will get equality. If epsilon is not a power of 2, you don't exactly have equality, but almost. Okay? In fact, it depends. You can also choose over definition of Bezoff spaces, for which indeed you have equality of the norms. But if you take the one with Littlewood by decomposition, you cannot have exactly equality. It doesn't matter. So, but in what we did, we also used restriction of Bezoff spaces to low and high frequencies. And at this point, you have to be very careful because if you perform a change variable, well, the threshold between low and high frequencies is going to move. So again, you can check by yourself by going to the definition of these low and high frequency norms. So that's what happens. Okay, so if you compute the norm, so I have to introduce one more notation because I have now to specify, okay, it's low frequencies, but I have to specify exactly where I stop. So here, let me introduce some parameter. What could be called? I don't know. Let's call it R0. So what is the definition which is here? So Z, B, S, 2, 1, low frequency R0 means this is the sum for all j where you stop at size R0 of well, the usual definition. Okay, so with this definition, so if you compute this, then the effect would be again the same factor epsilon s minus d over 2. And the low frequency will be shifted to L rho 0 epsilon minus 1. And the same for high frequencies. Okay, so finally, in order to justify this limit, okay, I start with a solution of E epsilon. Then I perform the change of variable and see what happens. In fact, the first thing that I have to check, to do is to solve E epsilon. In order to solve E epsilon, I have to notice the following fact. So, better to take my notes to be sure that what I'm saying is correct. So, in fact, you can check that A epsilon, U epsilon, Tx satisfies E epsilon if and only if you do the same dilation by epsilon of the space and time variable, this solves Euler equation with epsilon equal 1. Okay, this is just a computation. Okay, which means that what we did before, with the theorem that I stated before, this one, okay, that applies in particular to Euler equation. So maybe this theorem, I should call it theorem 2 because I'm going to refer to it very soon. Okay, so it means that in order to solve Euler equation for general epsilon, it suffices to solve Euler equation by means of theorem 2 for epsilon equal 1. The only thing that I have to check is the smallest condition. Yeah. Sorry? Yeah. No, it's not to 1. No, I will do, I am interested by epsilon tend to 0, but the first thing that I have to do is to solve the system. And what I am saying that solving the system is actually equivalent to solving the system with epsilon equal 1 thanks to this change of unknown. Okay? So what I do, okay, I apply my theorem for epsilon equal 1, and I deduce a result for this one. But then I have to check what is the smallest condition. So we use theorem 2. So theorem 2 is used to solve E1. So what is important is the smallest condition. So, okay, you use theorem 2 to solve E1 with data which have been rescaled. So the data are A0, U0, epsilon x. And then the smallest condition that you have to use is this one. So you need A0, U0, epsilon, low frequencies. So it's low frequency with cutoff at 1, plus A0, sorry, it's d over 2, u0 with cutoff at 1 also, is smaller than some alpha, some fixed alpha, which is completely independent of epsilon. Okay, this is very important. So now, what it corresponds to what? If you want, here there is also the epsilon. So high frequencies. So now, thanks to my rescaling identity, it corresponds to this. So, as I said before, this term is invariant by rescaling. The only thing that changed is the threshold between low and high frequencies. So the first term gives a condition which is almost independent of epsilon, which is very good because something which is going to be uniform. Okay, so here is the dependence good or bad? Well, we are lucky because the dependency is good. It will correspond to epsilon minus 1. So clearly, when epsilon tends to 0, you can make this high frequency, this assumption independent of epsilon. Okay, you can, if I am even allowed to take data which depends of epsilon if I want, but if for example, I take fixed data, if I take fixed data such that the b d over 2 to 1 norm, did I did a mistake? Or, no, it's not good, sorry. It's the opposite. Yeah, otherwise not good. Yes, because it was S minus d over 2, so it's epsilon. Okay, so it means that for fixed data, see if I take fixed data which are in the intersection of these two spaces, and for which this term is small, then you are sure that for small enough epsilon, this condition is going to be satisfied, and then you can solve your system. And okay, so the solution you get satisfies, so I am not going to write everything, but it satisfies uniform estimates. So typically it satisfies AT U epsilon T, low frequencies B d over 2 to 1 plus something with an integral that I am not going to write. But the term that I want to write, because this is terribly important, this is the estimate for the damp mode. So here, the damp mode will correspond to this combination. And this, what you will get is that the integral of the damp mode, that is integral of epsilon minus 1 u epsilon use gradient epsilon, all this is smaller than alpha. Okay, it means that you are able to prove a global existence theorem for all small epsilon, and there's some condition which is independent of epsilon, and you have some some estimates which have a good dependency with respect to epsilon. In particular, there is one that corresponds to the damp mode, which is going to be very useful. Yeah. Yeah. Well, is this the same node? Yeah, yes. I mean, this one. Yes, I take R0 equal to 1. I can take something else, but it's in the theorem 2 that I stated before. We add ρ0, R0 equal 1. In fact, you can prove similar result for any value of R0, but then the constant smallest condition is going to change. Okay, so now let me go back to the diffusive system. Okay, I propose that I will not erase this blackboard. So for the relaxation limit, that is the limit for epsilon tends to 0. Remember that I did this change of unknown, which is not exactly the same as the one I did for proving the theorem. Remember that it was this one. I didn't touch to the space variable. I touched only to the time variable, and also the way I treat U and A is not the same. Okay? So what does it give for this? So in particular, if you do this channel variable, it's interesting to look what happens for this. So for this, what happens is, so you will have epsilon minus epsilon plus gradient of, so this is a damp mode, okay, at Tx. So it will give what? It will give, I have to multiply by epsilon, so it will give sorry, that's something strange. No, okay, it gives this epsilon plus gradient of epsilon. No, it's correct. Epsilon Tx. And I will call this W epsilon. Okay, this is a damp mode. Okay, so what kind of information do I have for the damp mode through this inequality that I call, I don't know, number 2. Okay, so 2 gives thanks to the change of time variable, it gives this. It gives integral from 0 to t to W epsilon B d over 2 to 1 is bounded by alpha epsilon. Okay. So the damp mode tends to 0. 1 epsilon tends to 0, and you even have the rate of convergence. The rate of convergence is epsilon. And remember, it was important because the heuristics, in the heuristic, I said that formally we expect this combination to tend to 0. So thanks to the theorem on the left, it's indeed the case, and you even have, you can even know for which norm, for this one, and you even know the rate. So now it's not too difficult to conclude, to prove the convergence. So what you do, so you go back to the equation, which is to this equation, okay? But that you will write by introducing the W epsilon. Okay, so this equation, so this one implies, it's equivalent, in fact. I just look at the first equation, and I write the first equation by replacing U by W. W and A. So if you do that, you will get on the left-hand side the porous media equation. And on the right-hand side, you will get minus divergence of 1 plus A epsilon gradient of no, sorry, W epsilon. Okay, so what can be said of the right-hand side? So I said that the term with W epsilon is of order epsilon for this norm. So you have to multiply it by this factor, but this factor is harmless because I don't know if you can see it through the estimate. Here, more or less, you can see it. You have, in fact, this estimate, I didn't write all the terms, but it gives you uniform control for the B d over 2 to 1 norm of epsilon. So thanks to that, you know that this term is O of epsilon in the space L1 B. So what happens is that you multiply B d over 2 by B d over 2. I told you that this space was a stable byproduct, but since you take one derivative, you end up in the space with d over 2 minus 1 to 1. Okay, so it's enough. I will not, I don't have time to give the complete proof, but now it's not too difficult to conclude, to prove the convergence. So what you do the difference between the equation which is satisfied by E epsilon and the expected limit equation that I erased, but which was the porous media equation. Okay, so the difference is something like this. It's dt of B epsilon. So this, okay, minus divergence of, for example, 1 plus B, gradient of the difference of this. And on the right-hand side, you will have, well, you will have up to the sign, you will have this term. And you have another term that I don't want to write, but that corresponds to the fact that for this equation, you had A epsilon, and for the porous media equation, you have a B. I don't write the next term, but it's a good term. Something like, I'm not completely sure, but it will be something like, well, I put good because I don't want to write something false. But this term, you know it, that this term is O epsilon in L1. So if you assume, for example, that you start with the same initial data, here you have some freedom. You can just assume that the initial data have a limit, it's enough. If it's the same. So it implies that, so here, more or less, if you just look at small b, this is like a heat equation. So you use L1 maximal regularity estimate for a heat equation that I proved in the second lecture. And what you get in the end is this information. So the difference in L infinity R plus B d over 2 minus 1 to 1 intersected with L1 B d over 2 plus 1 to 1 is O of epsilon. Okay, so it gives you a third theorem. Theorem 3, well, this inequality is true under the previous assumptions. This third inequality is true. We have this convergence result. In fact, you have to check also, but it's not a big issue, you have to check that, well, let's say the limit system has a solution. But this is easy, in fact. And 3 is true. So I did not exactly give the proof because, in fact, you have some nonlinear terms to check. But all these terms may be checked just by using the product laws that I recalled in my second lecture. Really, there is absolutely nothing difficult. And also, you have to justify the existence of a solution for the limit system. But as I said, it's a parabolic equation, at least for small b, and it may be solved by the Banach fixed point theorem very easily. In the case of small data, it's really not an issue to do it. It's even a good exercise to do it. Okay, thanks. I think I will stop here. So yeah, by the way, because one of you asked me a question, if there were some lecture notes. So lecture notes, it's not exactly what I said, but there are some similarities. The closest text to what I did is some survey that I wrote recently, which has been published. So by myself, it's a survey. I don't remember the title, but it's published at European Mathematical Society, maybe last year. Well, it's also an archive. Or if you want, if you write me, then I can send you the TAL version. Okay. It's very close to what to this course, with of course more details. So unfortunately, I didn't have time because in my first lecture, I announced that there would be a party on partially dissipative systems and one on partially parabolic systems. Unfortunately, I need at least one more course to do it. So in the survey, there is only partially dissipative for the very reasons that now I have a PhD student of mine is studying partially parabolic systems, but it's not completely finished. So, well, there are special cases that are well known, like a compressible Navier-Stokes equation. But so far, the general theory has not been written in this framework, but it's in progress. I mean, in the coming months, you will see there is already one paper on arXiv, but it's not really finished, and there are only local results. So maybe it's better to wait a little. But you do more or less, you can do the same for parabolic systems, except that the functional framework is not going to be the same.